Welcome, everybody. So the class today is on getting some of the techniques down for hand bows. Things that will help you get a more stable, repeatable shot process going so that you can then refine these techniques to improve as you keep practicing. So a lot of these things are going to kind of interact and play into the next step. So if you have questions, absolutely feel free to ask. Let me know. And let's get started with the first one. And that is holding your bow. So for gripping the bow, there are two basic styles that people will talk to you about. One is a closed grip. That is, all your fingers are wrapped around the handle, right? Your thumb is over this finger. That is a standard closed grip. It is what everybody is taught when they're first starting. The second one is an open grip. And for this one, you're actually going to start releasing some fingers from the grip and have them off to the side. Whether it's 2 fingers, 3 fingers, how far you hold them off to the side is entirely a personal preference. It's all a matter of what is comfortable for you to hold the bow and keep it under control for doing your shot, right? And so there are a couple of advantages, disadvantages to each one. On a closed grip, if you see my arm, the string is right up against my bracer here, right? It is straight up against the bracer. On an open grip, I can fit my hand in between the string and the bracer. I actually don't even need to wear a bracer when I shoot with an open grip because it takes the elbow and it rotates that elbow out away from the string. A closed grip brings it in, an open grip moves it away. So if you have issues with your elbow hyperextending and it tends to come in, an open grip will naturally rotate that elbow away. And if it starts to come in, it's still not going to come all the way in and get in the way of the string. So if you are having issues with your arm and how that elbow wants to kick in, start looking at an open grip because it will start rotating things away and keep it out of the path of the string. Now, when you do an open grip, people sometimes get uncomfortable and they think they're going to drop the bow. So there are a couple of things you can do if you are going to an open grip to help keep that control. One of them is a finger sling. This can be shoelace, it can be paracord, it can be anything you want. The idea is you put it past the knuckle on your finger and on your thumb, and then you have some way of tensioning it. In this one, it's just some plastic tubing. That's all it is. So you put it past and you put that plastic tubing up against it. Now, that bow cannot escape. It is not going to leave. Even if I had a completely open grip, that bow is not getting away. It's not jumping down range. When you're done shooting, you just slacken, take it off. The other way is that you can get a wrist sling that will go from the bow up and around the back of your wrist so that if you have a loose grip, the shot can't come away. It will actually wrap around here and it will come into your wrist. So you can do that on any type of bow. On a bow like this, you can just tie it right to the bottom of the handle and then have a loop. Your hand goes through the loop and it holds it.
There's
If
one,
you have,
there is
what's
one
that?
question about,
Yes.
is it more important to not break your wrist? As I assume, the wrist position.
So the breaking of the wrist in the Olympic. So here's a more modern pistol grip bow, right? And the wrist slings usually attach to this spot here, or some of them actually have an attachment point at the back. This bow doesn't. But some of them have an attachment point here. And so you would actually attach that sling there. Now, the breaking of the wrist is a feature specific to Olympic bows because you have a long stabilizer coming out. And the idea for those is that you don't want to induce a torque on the bow at all. You want no torque happening on the bow. And so, because of that long weight coming out the front, you want the bow to tip down on release. And you just let the weight happen. And to follow that, you break your wrist. And that's where this turn down of the wrist happens. Hopefully you're able to catch that on the camera there, but that's where that turn down happens.
My comment about the wristing break was more towards keeping the string away from your arm when you're holding the bow, with your open grip versus closed grip on the handle of the bow. So whether you break your wrist or you have it straight,
for
you break
that
it
initial
yeah.
for that initial holding out.
Correct.
Right. That's
so
okay.
To keep your elbow and away from and the lower arm away from the string.
So we're actually going to get to that here in just a minute. If you have a closed grip, it is okay if the string is up against your arm. You for starting out, that's just the position it's going to be in. But we'll get to that here in actually just a minute here, kind of as we combine everything between. So there was the grip, right? Open versus closed. The next thing is your stance and how you stand at the line. So it's a little hard to point the camera down at my feet, so I'm going to use my hands to demonstrate. So a closed stance is where the tips of your toes are in line to the target, right? And they are about shoulder width apart, and the tips of your toes stay in line, pointing towards the target. That is the typical thing that people are taught when you are first starting. Now, when you move to an open grip, you generally have to open your stance. And what that means is that the foot leading towards the target, facing the target, is going to come back and tilt a little bit. And there's a reason for doing this, and it's your natural point of aim. So even in the room you're in right now, even if you don't have your bow with you, you can practice this technique. So I'm going to start with a closed grip. I'm just going to take my stance. I have my feet in a closed stance position, tip to tip. And what I'm going to do is point the bow at the target. I'm not going to look at the target. I'm going to keep looking forward, and I'm just going to hold the bow out and point. This is where my body wants to point right now, based on where I'm standing and how I'm holding the bow. Now turn and look. If you are not pointing at the target, then adjust. And you can do this by opening up your feet or turning your whole body, whichever way is going to work for you to line up to the target. The idea of this for natural point of aim is that when it's time to do every shot, you don't want to move when you come up for the shot, right? If every time I have to come up for the shot and I have to turn, that's extra motion, that's extra forces I'm inducing into this, and that's extra energy I have to do every time to move my bow and line up the shot every time. So if I can just stand at the line, hold my bow out, and then turn and look and see if I'm lined up, it makes it a lot easier every shot. The general theory is that if you have a closed grip, you will have a closed stance. If you have an open grip, you will have an open stance. And the reason is, if I'm holding this towards there, and I'm in a closed stance and a closed grip. When I open, my hand has moved to the right. My bow hand has moved. In order to bring that back, I need to open my stance. So now this is my natural point of aim. If I have opened my grip, so I've taken fingers off, which has rotated my elbow out, it moves my hand the other direction. In order to naturally point and keep it at the target where I want it to be every shot, I open my feet up. So I move the front foot back and tilt it just a little bit. How much you tilt it and how much you move it is completely personal. So when you're at the line, and I do this every time I go out to the line, because if I'm not centered on the target, right? If there are 3 or 4 people and we're all shooting at one target, I may not be dead center. And I want to know that I am lined up straight, right? So I will just hold out, take a look, and then adjust my position so I am straight on the target for every shot. Because when you're standing at the line, you don't have to be square to the line. You have to either straddle the line or toe the line, depending on your kingdom. But you can be tilted on that line so that you are directly pointing at the target. And just raising your bow and then taking the look will help you find that position. All right. So we've covered the initial grip and that initial stance. And those get you set up for progressing through the shot sequence, right? The next thing to talk about is getting to your anchor point. Finding that spot where you can repeatedly come back to so that your shot is the same every time. So when you're anchoring, and I'm going to put an arrow on for this one just in case, but and I do have a bail over here, so I will be shooting, not to worry. I've got a nice big professional bail there to stop anything from happening. So anchor points. When you're trying to find that anchor, it is a completely personal choice where you're at. Some people stop at the front of their lip. And it might be the top finger. It might be the middle finger. It could be the bottom finger. Some people go to the canine tooth, right? They come back to that tooth every time. Some people come back to the corner of their lip. Others take it back to the ear, right? You find the spot that you can repeatedly draw to and are comfortable with. So it's drawing back and finding your spot. And even if you don't shoot, just let it down, come back and do it again. Can you find that same spot? Right? The other thing with an anchor is that it helps to have more than one reference. So just because I'm touching my face with one finger doesn't mean I can't find another reference to look at or to feel as I'm lining things up. For instance, if I come to the front, I can touch my nose to the string, right? I can get the string right in the center of my nose, and that's another reference. So now I have finger to center of lip and string to nose. And because I can do that, I can also look with my eye through the string to the point of the arrow. I've now got 3 points of reference if I shoot from the center of my lip up front. Because is my string aligned with the eye, or do I have it too far to the left or to the right? Is it touching my nose in the same spot, or is it on the wrong side of the nose, right? Is it too far to the left or too far to the right, or do I have it down the center? The more points of reference that you can recognize when you're shooting will help in that consistency. And sometimes it's even just your hand can have multiple points of reference, because there's a difference between just touching with the one finger and do I rotate my hand out, or am I touching with all 3 fingers and where is it at? Am I touching with them canted forward or back, right? Even just your hand can have multiple points of reference. How much pressure you're putting in can be another reference point. You think about these different ways of finding that consistency and just doing that again and again. So 1 point of reference for the anchor, bare minimum. But if you can start recognizing other points of reference, those are additional anchor points, and they will help you be more consistent in your shot. If you do a thumb draw, right? Now, we've been talking about finger draw, and that's what I've been demonstrating. If you do a thumb draw, those points of reference are going to be different. If you're used to a finger draw, you're used to pressing it into your face, right? You're pushing it into your face to get that constant reference. When you do that with a thumb draw, you actually kick the arrow wide right. As a right-handed shooter, the first time I did that, I shot 4 feet to the right. And there's a reason for that. When you shoot thumb, you actually put the arrow on the other side of the bow, right? The general rule is if you're releasing with your fingers, the arrow should be over your fingers. If you are releasing with your thumb, the arrow should be over your thumb. The reason you do that is that on a thumb draw, you're actually you put your thumb underneath, this finger is going to lock the thumb in place, and it's going to press against the arrow. So when you press against the arrow, it holds it against the bow. I can hold the bow like this, and that arrow is not going to fall. I can turn the bow any direction, and that arrow isn't going to move, and that's minimal pressure. I'm not cranking on the arrow. That's just touching it to hold it in place, right? But now, if you press your thumb into your face, you actually end up pressing the arrow into the back of the bow. And so what happens on release is that you have moved that tip to point away by pressing into your face. So for a thumb draw, the thing that you'll find is light pressure, or you're going to use one of your thumb knuckles, either this knuckle or all the way back at the hand, to touch your face and be the anchor. Because when I touch with that thumb, the arrow is farther away from my face. And that keeps it from kicking off the bow and going wide to the side. So if you do decide to do thumb draw, just remember that for an anchor point, it's light pressure. A finger draw, you generally have more pressure on your face for finding your anchor point. Is that generally making sense with the anchor points and finding out where those are at? Finding your anchor point and just practicing with that?
It is. I went and got a bow and I'm practicing right now.
Okay. All right. The next thing with an anchor, avoid twisting the string at your face. And here's what we'll demonstrate for this one. So I'm going to point this not directly at the camera to not go directly at people, but I want you to be able to see what happens here. So I'm going to start with an open grip. Now, I've practiced this before. I'm very comfortable with it. If you're not comfortable doing this with an open grip, do it with a closed but loose grip, right? That you're not completely holding the bow, right? You're not gripping the bow, but you've got it under control, right? So I'm going to do this with an open grip. I'm going to pull back to my face. And now I'm going to tilt my fingers away from my face. You see the bow move?
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm going to put more pressure on my bottom fingers into my face. And you see the bow move, right? Because this hand is just holding it here. I'm letting it move with my fingers. Now, if I have a grip, like I am holding this bow tight, right? I go and I do that same thing. Do you see the bow move at all?
Little, but very little.
Right? Very little. What's actually happening is I am taking that string and doing this, right? Because the bow can't move and keep the string straight, when you have a solid grip on the bow and you twist with your fingers on the string, you are creating a pocket in that string. And when you release, that pocket is going to snap back and it's going to go this way and then come back. And it's going to oscillate. As the string is moving forward, that pocket is oscillating as the string is correcting. At some point in that oscillation, the arrow will release from the string. But where? Right? And that's where you get a variation in your left to right. Because any little bit of movement in the knock, left to right at the bow, gets magnified downrange. Right? 20 yards downrange, that little variation is now pushing it to the outer part of the target. So if you have a closed grip and a tight grip on the bow, be very careful that you are not twisting the string at your anchor point, because you will get that variation that will happen. If you want to try this when you're at the range, you can do it with an arrow on, right? Just loosen your grip a little bit, right? You don't have to go full open like I was. Just loosen and watch when you're at your anchor, is your bow tilting? If your bow is tilting to one side or the other, that means you're torquing the string, right? And work on finding how to keep the bow straight. Like, what part of your anchor is going to keep the bow straight up and down how you plan to hold it, right? Because then the string is straight, and when you release, you're not getting that oscillation in the string as it comes forward. All right. Next part is, we talked about the natural point of aim, so that when you're at a standard target, right, you can always be pointing at the center. You're not always shooting a standard target, right? Sometimes you're shooting something where you have to move your point of aim, right? Hit target 1, target 2, target 3, hit the arm, hit the leg, hit the chest, hit the head, right? You have to move your point of aim. So how do you move that point of aim and keep everything consistent? The way to do that is with your hips. You want to avoid doing a left-right adjustment with only your arm. And the reason is that you are inducing a torque on the bow if you are moving your arm. And when you're under pressure, right? If I've got this fully drawn and I'm under pressure, I can move with my arm and I can hold it there, right? It will stay put. But as soon as I let go of the string, I no longer have that force acting against where I've pushed it. And it's going to move. The bow is going to continue to move in that direction. If you're moving it, if you're pushing it away from the arrow, it's not going to affect it as much. But if the arrow is over your fingers and you're a right-handed shooter and you are pulling your bow to the left, right? You're pulling it towards the arrow. On release, it's going to continue to pull into the arrow before that arrow has cleared your bow. So avoid doing left to right adjustments with just your arm. The ideal way to do it is with your hips. turn the core of your body to go, I need to target 1, target 2, target 3, right? Do it at your hips so that you're not inducing a torque on the bow that's going to react on release. It's the same thing up and down. Now, for up and down adjustments, you're not going to induce a torque on the bow, right? If I take my arm and I go high and I go low with just my arm, I'm not inducing a torque. It's not going to affect the shot by pulling it left or pulling it right. But it has another effect. So, got an arrow with some measurements on it. Maybe you can see them, but watch what happens if I just move my arm up and down. Can you see that draw length changing? By moving just my arm, when I go up, I shorten my draw length. I lose power. When I go down, I increase my draw length. I'm putting more power into the bow. So it's not going to behave the same way you expect because you're either giving it less force or more force as you're moving it up and down. If you do it with your hips, then it stays the same. That draw length, if I can keep it on there, if I move just my hips,
Mhm.
and I'll come back a little bit to get in full view. That draw length never changes. So by using your hips to do both left, right, and up and down, you avoid putting a torque on the bow and you avoid changing your draw length. It makes for a more consistent shot by making the change at your hip instead of using your arm. The other thing that you'll find is once you're all the way back, right, and you've drawn all the way back, this shoulder can actually lock into position because of the force on it. And it does not want to move up, down, left, right. You can actually fight the bow in trying to get it high enough by just raising your arm. Like, there are times when I was first learning this technique, I could not get my bow high enough by just moving my arm. It was literally fighting me. It did not want to do it. I had to use my hips. And that's where I started learning the technique of use your hip to swivel and go up and down, because when you're under full pressure, if you're aligned correctly, if you've got all the bones aligned, they are pressing and locking into place. And they don't want to move very easily, right? They are braced, they are ready to absorb the impact. They don't want to move. And it can be actually really difficult to force that movement. All right. Next topic with this. So you've got your stance, you've got your grip, you've found your anchor. You got to aim, right? You need to know how to aim. I I've got to write it for this. I will put it out in the chat here towards the end. There is a link inside of it. Charles Archery blog, WordPress, has a great write-up on the different types of methods for aiming. One of them, I'm going to generalize it down to 3. He's got it broken out into more subdivisions, more just like breaking it apart a little bit more. But there are 3 main ones. The first is just instinct. It feels right. Let it go. It's like throwing a ball. I don't aim where I'm throwing. It feels right. I throw the ball. Maybe it hits the glove, maybe it doesn't, right? You keep practicing and you start learning, when does it feel right to throw the arrow? And it's just a repetition. The next one is what they call gap shooting. And that is, you're going to reference the point of the arrow and you're going to find a spot on the target. So if you've got the round target, it might be that you're going to put the point of the arrow at the bottom of the target. It might be it happens to be at the center of the target. It could be at the top of the target, right? Maybe your left to right isn't dead center when you shoot, and you have to aim a little to the right and low. But through practice, you find where that point of aim is at. And then you pick that point. So if I shoot here, it will hit in the center, right? And when you're first trying to find that, what you generally do is aim for the center. Put the point of the arrow on the center and see where your arrow hits. Does it hit high and left? Does it just hit high? Okay. Now move your aim point down. Has it gone to center? Do you need to adjust a little more, right? That's gap shooting. So you're going to find that spot of how high or low and how far left or right you need to put the point of the arrow at the target in order to hit the center. The other is using marks on your riser. So I have one here. So on my modern bow, can you see these white marks
Mhm.
that are right there? Those are my gap marks. That mark, my upper one, is 20 yards. The next one is 30 yards because see where my handle is. In order to hit 30 yards, I need to hold the bow higher, right? So the idea with riser marks is that you're going to hold that mark level with the center of the target. The left to right, you have to figure out separately. So you're using 2 reference points when you do this. That mark is the level for up and down. And then maybe it's the point of the arrow that will be in the center of the target. Maybe the point of your arrow has to be a little to the left or a little to the right, right? You learn this with practice. But it's that 2-step method of hold the bow this high and align my left to right. Let it go. Those marks are completely allowed in SCA shooting because it is not a sight bar, right? You don't have something attached that's out here in the open with a pin or anything like that. Riser marks are specifically allowed. You can do them with paint. When I was first deciding where my mark should be, I had a rubber band on here. And then I'd roll the rubber band up and down until I was consistent. And once I found that spot, I moved the rubber band and put some paint there. And then I went to the next yardage and did the next one. Put the rubber band at that spot where I thought it might be to take a guess and shoot. Move the rubber band. Repeat, repeat, repeat. All right. So there's aiming. Now, the next step is you're sitting there, you're aimed, you're lined up. Now it's prepare to release. It's not the release itself, but prepare to release. And there are two specific steps that are part of this that people often overlook, but make a big difference in improving your shot. And that is, you are going to push the bow, not just hold the bow, push the bow. Even if it doesn't move, you want to be telling these muscles to push. And the other is with your draw hand, it's not just holding, it's pulling. Even if you're not moving the string, you're telling your muscles back here and in your back to pull, right? Think of it like a tug of war rope. You're not always just holding the rope, you're pulling the rope, right? That rope may not be moving, but you're still pulling. And what happens if you let go of that? If the person on the other end lets go of the rope, you go backwards, right? That's the same thing that you want to happen with the shot. That when you're at your anchor and you're getting ready to release, if you're just holding and you let go, your hand stays put. If you are pulling, your hand will come back because now the force that you are pulling against is gone and your hand will move backwards. That's how you can tell whether or not you're actually getting that pre-release step engaged for back here at your hand. Does your hand just stay still on release or does it come back? It doesn't have to fly back, right? It doesn't have to go way back like this. The Japanese archery that I do, it does that. That's separate, but that's an exaggeration of that same technique though, that you want that act of still pulling even if you're not moving the string farther back. With the bow, with the push, the reason you do that is you want to command the bow to do something when you've released the string. Because if I am just holding the bow, right? I'm all the way drawn, I'm not pushing, I'm just holding. As soon as I release the string, my bow's going to drop. Because I was just holding it here. I wasn't doing anything else. My bow's going to drop down. If you are pushing, the bow is actually going to stay at this level until the arrow has enough time to get past the bow. And that's what you're looking for. You want to be able to control the bow so that the arrow has time to get past the bow and then it can drop. Then it can move. But you don't want to be inducing anything to alter that arrow when it's moving past the bow, right? You don't want to hit it into the arrow. You don't want to deflect it. You don't want to move it. So that push command is what helps keep it stable. So we'll demonstrate this with the bail that I have. Let's see if I can get this. Can I make this my full screen here or not? There we go. Okay. Bigger monitor, I can see it easier. So I am just going to hold both the string and the bow. I'm not going to do the pre-release. So when I get there, my hand didn't really move back and my bow just dropped because I wasn't telling it to do anything. I didn't have a command in my muscles to tell it what to do. But now, if I change that, and I'm going to actively push and pull on at the release, the bow stays up, my hand comes back. Hopefully that was fully in shot. It's a little hard to see when I'm at draw. But did you see that difference between when I'm just holding and then on release, the bow drops? But if I'm pushing, if I'm actively pushing the bow out, it will stay there long enough for the arrow to get past.
Yeah, that was a clear view. Thank you. We do have a raised hand from Indy.
Yes, what's that?
I was wondering about what your breath is doing in that preparing to release phase. Are you holding your breath, releasing your breath? What do you do?
So when I was first learning, I tended to hold my breath, and that's not great because all of a sudden you start getting tired and you start wavering. It's have a consistent breathing pattern. Some people like to release on an in. Some people like to release as they've just taken in and then they do and then they hold and release. Others like to do it on the exhale. That is entirely a matter of personal preference, but don't just hold your breath. I've done that. You all of a sudden start wavering as if you're holding the shot too long and you're getting tired of holding your breath. Just breathe and find the part of that cycle that works for you, whether it's on the in and brief hold, on the exhale. Archers that I've talked to all have their own personal preference for how they do it. But yes, that's a great question. And don't just hold your breath. That's a lesson I had to learn the hard way. All right. Let's demonstrate the other one here with the shot as well. And this is the whole, what happens if you're using your arm to adjust the shot as opposed to your hip? And watch what happens with the bow. So I come up, and now I'm going to move my arm to my left. Right? I'm not going to use my hips. I'm going to use my arm. As soon as I released, that arm kicked farther because I was pulling And then on release, it moved. I couldn't stop it. That was just, I had put so much force into moving it with my hand that when I let go, it moved farther, which kicks my arrow farther to the left because that arrow has not had nearly enough time to get past the bow before it's already moving. And I am affecting that shot. So you can't stop that from happening, right? If you're moving your point of aim with your arm, you will affect that arrow. If you're moving it away from the arrow, it's a minimum effect. But if you're moving it towards the arrow, you will push it. It's gonna push it to the left. If you're a right-handed shooter, it's gonna push it left. Left-handed shooter, you'll push it right. But you get the idea. If you are moving the bow towards the arrow and you're doing it with just your arm, it's gonna kick, and you can't stop it, even with a push, right? Even if you are actively pushing that bow out, right? If you are torquing it with just your arm for that shot, you can't stop it from going farther to the side. It's going to move. All right. Now, there is more you can do with the pressure on the bow. And this applies to thumb ring shooters. Is there anybody here who does thumb ring, or is everybody a finger shooter?
Yes, I am thumb ring.
Okay, let's
I'm
talk thumb
shooting
rings here
Asian.
quickly. Which version did you say?
I shoot Asian. I'm shooting a
Okay.
Mongol bow.
Yep. So you've got one of the static gear bows like this, right?
Mhm.
Something similar. Okay. For thumb shooting, there are different ways you can put pressure on the handle to help with the shooting. The typical is that the bow is right down the center of your palm, right? And you are pushing straight with that center of your palm. With your grip, if you've got a closed grip like this, right? Then everything is straight down the center. The two things that you can do to change those pressure points is you can use your bottom fingers
That's what I do.
to put pressure on the bow. And this is what's called katra,
Mhm.
where you are moving the bow automatically on release, because you want it to happen not because as the shot is happening, you're telling the bow to do that. You want the bow to just do it,
Drop it. Yeah.
right? And by using a lower finger to put pressure on the handle, you will get the bow to tilt forward. So let's grab an arrow and demonstrate that quickly. I'm going to use my middle finger to put pressure lower on the handle.
Right.
And the bow tilts forward, right? You saw this tip come back,
Mhm.
bow tilts forward. I didn't have to tell the bow to do that on release, because you don't want to start guessing or anticipating the shot. You want it to just happen, right? The other thing you can do is called side katra. where instead of the bow, get in the frame here, instead of the bow doing this, you actually have the bow do this and move out of the way. Because you're shooting off your thumb, you can have it move to the left on release, and it just gets out of the way, right? And the way that you do that is instead of putting pressure with the middle of your palm, you put the pressure through your thumb, right? You're actually going to push with your thumb. So the pressure point is on the side of the bow and not in the center of the bow. So on release, it's going to move to the side because you're pushing with your thumb instead of the web. And you can do both of those together. So you can have just side katra, you can have just forward katra, or you can combine them and do both of them. So if I'm back at draw, I'm going to put pressure with, I'm not going to put pressure on the front. I'm just going to put pressure with my thumb. The bow moves out of the way. Bow kicks to the side. I didn't have to tell it to move, just did it. And if I wanted to do them both, I would put pressure here with one of these lower fingers, and I would push with my thumb. So on release, the bow tilts and moves out of the way.
That makes sense.
Right? Because if you are trying to anticipate the shot and trying to do it by telling your arm to move the bow on release, you start getting into target panic areas where you start predicting or anticipating the shot and you move it too soon, right? You start getting ready for the shot, and even before you release, you're doing this. Now you're moving your arrow down, right? Because you're tilting the bow down and out of the way. But you haven't shot yet. You haven't released yet. And you're moving your point because you're anticipating. So by doing it with pressure on the handle and changing by having that pressure point be lower on the grip or through your thumb, you don't have to anticipate. You don't have to tell the bow to move. It will just move and it will get out of the way. For those of you who are finger shooters, don't do katra because you are moving the bow into the arrow, right? Or you're tilting it down, but the bow, the modern bows with the pistol grips aren't designed to work the same way. So don't use katra on a modern bow, and if you're a finger release. The katra and using those techniques of getting the bow to tilt down or tilt to the side is purely for thumb shooters, for the static eared recurve, right? When you're shooting off the other side of the bow. Otherwise, it's just going to mess you up if you're a finger shooter or you're using a modern and you're using a modern recurve for it.
If I might, sir, you were
Yes.
talking about breath.
Yes.
I shot Olympics. I also hunt. One of the things that was suggested is when you're practicing, just breathe. and
Yep.
you'll just naturally figure out where that spot is. And the only time that your breathing changes is the length of your tournament or the length of the field that you're walking if you're doing an outdoor shooting series. And it's entirely different in hunting because if you are above your target, you tend to draw and just kind of silence yourself. I'm sure if you have archers here that have watched videos, you've seen there is something about a deer's ears, and that arrow comes off off of that bow and you miss them by their hair. So your breathing in tournament style is usually just your breathing. And then when you're hunting, it's a little bit different.
Yeah. And you find where that spot is, right? Like you find where that naturally is and where your comfort point is.
I have two questions when you got a moment.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm wondering if you recommend doing like stretching warm-ups before you shoot, or do you just
Oh, yes.
go out there? And I've noticed that everyone just goes and shoots. No one bothers, warming up like in every other sport.
Yes. Definitely do warm-ups. I have stretching bands that I keep with that I'm working on my second screen here, so I'm trying to get
Yeah.
the document so I can load that up here. Yeah, I have just basic elastic bands that I use for stretching. I actually keep them at work as well. That I'll just practice going through the motions at work, right? So
My master made me a PVC pipe kind of practice bow, so I can kind of use that for working out before, my stretches.
yes,
You can also use doorways. If you don't have the money to have a whole kit, you can use doorways. You go forward through the doorway, you let yourself fall back through the doorway. Um, 'cause, a lot of
Excuse
times your
me, we're
tournaments
about to
use
get kicked
that.
out. We have 30 seconds and all these break rooms are going to be shut down.
oh,
Oh,
Great class, sir.
All right,
all
thank you.
right.
It was worth staying up for.
Yes, I will get this the document to the chancellor